Did you miss me? I'm back after a really long break. I mean, if you don't count my reaction video to Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. But I'm back to filming and editing videos. So, for those of you who saw my community post, I was gonna watch Godzilla Minus One on Netflix since it's now available for VOD and on Netflix. So I already watched it with my dad, and here are my thoughts on the film. But before I give my thoughts on the film, I have to say to the people who have reviewed this movie who are saying, this is how Godzilla is supposed to be made and Hollywood doesn't understand it. Please tell me why this movie actually is better than the Hollywood Godzilla films when all you're going to talk about is, oh yeah, the visual effects are so amazing, and for once, do you actually care about the people in here? Give me another reason. Why is it that we are attached to the people? And stop saying that the VFX are good compared to the $200 million budgets. All I hear about these reviews are how small the budget is and how big the spectacle and the CGI is. I get it. The film looks amazing with a low budget, but can you please give me a reason why this movie defies the Hollywood laws of Godzilla? But anyway, yeah, out of that gripe, I'm gonna say what I liked about this movie, and I'm gonna say my final thoughts on it. And I'm gonna cut it up into 4 sections. 1, the story. A story is always important in a movie. 2, how emotionally connected am I to these characters? 3, the Godzilla himself, since Godzilla is the star of the movie. And number 4, what do I think about the climax? Alright, so first up we got the story. This story has a kamikaze pilot named Shikishima who was on Odo Island and got his crew killed because he was afraid to take the shot to kill a dinosaur that the people call Godzilla. And in his act of cowardice, he didn't kill the monster and got his friends killed. And after that, he now has survivor's guilt and is ridiculed by everybody for being a coward. After a bomb has been dropped on Bikini Atoll, the radiation of the bomb has absorbed on Godzilla and he's back on Tokyo. And Shikishima has to recover his trauma and his past so he can finally live on and defeat the monster that has consumed his soul after he left the island. Now that's a pretty great story, and they really demonstrate it here in this film. After Shikishima comes back from Odo Island and onto Japan, we see that the city is destroyed after the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And the first woman that goes here, I forgot what her name was, Sukomi, insults him and says how he's a coward for not protecting his people because everybody thought that he saved everybody from a U.S. attack because the U.S. attacked Japan's cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so they thought that Odo Island was attacked by U.S. military. And everybody in the village insults him. And when he finds Akiko and Noriko, I think that's what her name was, he finally finds peace. He finally finds something to ignore his trauma and actually live with something. But then Godzilla comes back and now he is afraid. And there's this one scene in the film that I really love where before the attack of Ginza, Shikishima says to Noriko that he's been having nightmares, and after he tells Noriko his nightmares and what actually happened at Odo Island, we see him struggle with his mortality, that he's been dreaming about the mechanics and people that they lost their lives. He's saying that in his dreams they're begging him to come to the afterlife because he's the one who caused their deaths. And then he begins to question that whether he deserves to live after the incident of getting his friends killed. And that is a really powerful scene that almost made me cry. And seeing him cry and saying that he wishes to be dead while Noriko comforts him, and he's trying so hard to not give in into those thoughts, and he just laughs and starts crying while Noriko's holding him. It was a powerful scene that I thought really examples what you're going to go into while watching this film. And what makes it even more stressful and sadder is that when Godzilla attacks Ginza, he does this amazing atomic blast, which I got hyped when that happened. Destroys the city of Ginza, but Noriko pushes Shikishima away from the blast impact zone. And then she gets drifted away, and so does other people. And Shikishima, like in the island, is the only survivor left when 30,000 people died. What makes this even worse, it wasn't that Shikishima survived the impact because of his actions and instincts. It was Noriko who pushed him, and now Noriko's lost her life trying to protect Shikishima, and it's the whole situation at Odo Island again, and he's crying while in the debris while Godzilla roars in a triumphant way. And now it's more impactful because this is literally the Odo Island scene again, but instead we see someone that Shikishima really loved and fought for lose her life. And now we're back at square one. Now his trauma is even more stronger and it has a hold of him. And then we see at the end where he's deciding whether he wants to like kill himself, whether he's gonna kill himself while attacking Godzilla in Operation Tsushima. It's like we see Shikishima struggle with his mortality and whether he deserves to live after what happened and his struggles. And then that last scene before Godzilla hits the atomic blast, we see him like fly to the mouth of Godzilla before he does his blast. And then we don't see him eject, and so we think he is dead, and he finally like succumbed to his trauma and finally like ended his war. But no, we find out that he's alive, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. And then we get to the end where we see Noriko's well, and everything is good and well, except for the climax, which I'll get into in a second. And then next we have the emotional impact that this film has. If my detailed explanation of what happens in the film didn't explain it, I'll go over it again. This movie has the best emotional impact on the human characters in a Godzilla film. In the American films, we normally push aside the human story, the human beast story, so we can see more of Godzilla kicking monster booty. But in here, it's the humans that are the focus, despite it being a Godzilla film. And it really channels back to the 1954 Godzilla film, where the humans are the focus and they're trying to get away of this monster. And while they're trying to get this monster away from their city, millions and thousands of people succumb to the radiation and the wounds that this monster is doing. All the destruction that he's doing is harming people, all while they're trying to get this monster away. And I really like how they channeled it back, and it's not oh, Godzilla has to fight another monster. These two monsters are gonna fight. And then it just sticks to Godzilla fighting like some monsters or just not appearing like for like 15 minutes while we had to do this human story. I'm not a big like hater on the legendary Godzilla films. I enjoy them. But that's just one of my biggest gripes with these legendary Godzilla films, is that we just push aside the human stories to see Godzilla. There's nothing wrong with seeing any monster action. It's just that why you just give an important or a very interesting human story if you're just gonna push it away for some monster action? It really seems that you really want some spectacle instead of some connections. Hey, wait a minute. And that's how these movies make a lot of money. They show a lot of monster spectacles so they don't have to stick to the boring human stories. But in here, we don't want to see Godzilla destroy people, because that's the sad part. And that's what really makes it like emotional. The fact that you don't want to see Godzilla appear in this film because you know what's going to happen if he appears in the film. He's going to cause destruction. He's going to cause death. And that's why you don't want him to be in this movie. You want to stick to human stories. It is a really good emotional, like psychological move for the director of this film, because in the American legendary Godzilla movies, we want to see Godzilla kick some butt, which is why we're excited to see Godzilla. Whereas in the Japanese Godzilla -1 movie, we don't want Godzilla to be on screen because we know he's going to cause some destruction and rampage on people that will most certainly die. And after that, there's going to be a gruesome emotional scene that we're just probably not going to be ready for. And that's what I love what the director does with this movie. Shikishima struggles with his mortality and his questions about whether he deserves to have a life after throwing away many lives that he caused on the island is a really, really great story, in my opinion, for a human character in a Godzilla movie. We see someone struggle with their trauma, their post-traumatic stress disorder, as he's having nightmares about the incidents, and them trying to welcome him in the afterlife, saying, "You stole our lives, so come to afterlife where you belong." And it's really, really sad and really dramatic seeing them. And like I said, that scene where he tells Noriko about his nightmares and what happened at the island, and she tries to comfort him, is one of the saddest scenes I've ever seen in a Godzilla movie, period. Well, right next to the girl crying for her mom dying in the first Godzilla 1954 film. Only for that same scene, combined with the harrowing introduction of the film of Godzilla destroying the mechanics in the Odo Island sequence, for Noriko to push away Shikishima from debris, instead of Shikishima like trusting his instincts and go hide for cover, it was Noriko who sacrificed herself to save Shikishima, and it's Odo Island again. He didn't save his life. Somebody else had to, protect him, and it was in that act of protection that cost them their lives. And it's makes it even more impactful seeing that Noriko was someone that he wanted to fight for after his trauma in the island. So everything he had fought for, everything that he wanted to do to get rid of that trauma is gone. And what makes it worse, his trauma is ever growing, since it is the monster that caused all the trauma, that caused everything. So this movie does great on emotional impact. Now let's talk about the Big G himself. Now, in America and in some Japanese films, Godzilla is depicted as a hero, saving the Japanese from other monsters who are threatening the island. And then sometimes it's weird because in Japanese films, Godzilla becomes the villain. And it kind of makes sense. In 1954, Godzilla wasn't a villain nor a hero. No, and he wasn't an anti-hero. He was a political message about the misuse of nuclear weapons and what would happen if we become too dependent on it. And I really like that message of Godzilla being a monster that humanity created out of their need of this new power that was found in 1940s movie. And then after that, Godzilla became probably the most marketable monster ever. And then we go to the American legendary movies where it's Godzilla being the hero and he has to fight other monsters. And in my opinion, there's nothing bad of making Godzilla the villain. I sometimes like the movies where Godzilla becomes a hero, like Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla or Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. But it really does kind of make you think as like, why is this message for about the misuse of nuclear war being the hero in these Japanese films? And it really makes you think. But you see this film and you're like, nah, man, nah. This is a Godzilla you're not wanting to root for. This is a Godzilla that's going to be in your nightmares. The design of this Godzilla is not one of my favorites, but I do really like it. It kind of reminds me of the legendary Godzilla mixed with what the Godzilla from 1954 looked like if it had color. This Godzilla is not a reptilian, as it has scars instead of scales. This is not a horrible depiction. This is literally what the director said, that Godzilla doesn't have scales and instead has scars of burn victims because he is a depiction of grief and loss after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. What makes this even better is that they friggin' bass boosted his OG roar from the 1954 one. And here, the roar is really loud. I watched this in my LG Smart TV on Netflix. I had it at 35 volume, and every single time he roared, I had to turn it down because it was so damn loud. I could hear the speakers vibrate and move when he roared. It was loud. And my dumbass wanted to watch it in a movie theater. That would shatter my ears. And like I said, his atomic breath is amazing. The way his like spikes go up and then they go back in like if it was a gun triggered, like if it was a gun pulling the trigger, and then the blast destroyed all the debris and made it a huge explosion, a mushroom cloud explosion. And it really adds the name to why it is an atomic breath, because that breath is the same as an atomic bomb, which creates a mushroom cloud after the impact. Nice detail. I also really like how he was defeated in the end. As he is a sea creature, he is adaptable to some pressure in the water, and they put him at some very deep pressure, so then they had to rise him up again, and he died due because of the change in water pressure that he's not used to. Really, the humans had a really smart plan. Speaking of the humans, I really like the humans, like I already said. Shikishima is easily the star of the movie with his trauma and his emotional impact he has towards the film. Noriko was an amazing support. Akiko is cute. And now to the climax, which I'm not really a huge fan of. In the end of the film, we see them finally defeat Godzilla and realize that Noriko isn't dead, and instead has a black spot in her mark, which according to some people say it is a Godzilla scale embedded in her skin, and that's what made her heal from the injuries, because Godzilla has healing abilities in the movie. And that's cool, I guess, but what really made me mad is that we see Godzilla is like alive, and this isn't some post-credit scene. No. Right after we see everybody have their happy ending, we come back to the sea where we find Godzilla's exploded and the corrupted body regain form, And it just made me mad because that emotional arc we saw Shikishima go through, recovering his trauma and letting go of the past and letting go of his questions as to whether he deserves life or not after what he had done in the island, kind of makes it like throw it away and chuck it like a nearest garbage disposal. His whole motive in the film is to kill Godzilla and finally end this creature because he caused him grief and trauma in the beginning. So to see Godzilla come back again means that all of Shikishima's efforts were just futile. It wasn't worth anything. And it kind of makes Shikishima's character arc not ended right after we saw him almost end his life trying to kill this monster. I don't know, it just makes me mad. It just makes Shikishima's character arc pointless. With his personal war, trying to kill Godzilla after his mistake. It just makes it seem like his character was just thrown out of the entire film entirely and chucked in a basket as they want to make a Godzilla -1 sequel. And no, I am not mad if Godzilla -1 had a sequel. But don't make it in the form of the same Godzilla from the first movie coming back. It just makes Shikishima's emotional struggle throughout the film seem worthless. But other than that, this film is amazing. It has almost everything you want in a monster film and more. It has an emotional character arc. It has an amazing Godzilla, a terrifying monster as the villain, great side characters, and visual effects that are amazing. Seriously, the visual effects in this film are amazing, but I'm not going to make a 12-minute ramble about why the special effects are amazing instead of talking about how good the film actually is. This film is amazing. And like I said in my previous video, I'm going to watch it. I was going to watch the film to see if it was the best film of 2023, and yeah, it is basically. I, for one, didn't think that this was going to be the best film of 2023, but it is. My list for my top 5 favorite 2023 movies from descending order, which means from best to fifth best, is Godzilla -1, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the Barbie movie, Evil Dead Rise, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. My list has been updated. This film is amazing. If you have Netflix, go ahead and watch it. It's available for a limited time. 9.8 out of 10. My only big problem was the climax, and that's it. I really hope that you guys watch this film after this video, or you have some free time to watch the film. It's amazing, and it's a movie that you probably won't ever forget watching. Thanks a lot.